Welcome to our fourth webinar. Thank you for joining our fourth webinar. Thank you for joining us. I am Lauren from the Jane Goodall Institute of Canada, and I am our Roots and Shoots manager. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about and share a guest speaker of ours from our Youth Advisory Council. So our Youth Advisory Council is made up of youth from across Canada. We have 12 amazing young women on our council this year. And today we have Kristyn, who's joining us from the GTA, who will be talking about her favorite ecosystem that's in her backyard, and also about the salmon run that we are lucky enough to have here in the GTA, which is super awesome that we are able to see. So I'm going to bring Kristyn on. She'll introduce herself. We're going to show a video of her in her backyard experience, and then we'll have time for questions that you guys might have to ask her about her favorite ecosystems, about what you saw in the video, about being on the Youth Leadership Council, any of those things. So I'm going to bring Kristyn on. Hi, Kristyn.
Hi, Lauren.
Welcome. So this is Kristyn. Kristyn, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So all of you will hear a little bit about me and my background in my video. But like Lauren said, my name is Kristyn, and I'm part of the Youth Advisory Council. And specifically, I'm on the Climate Action Committee. And our council basically holds different initiatives throughout the year to try to promote climate action in Canada. So my webinar is going to be about the vegetation and the salmon migration or salmon run that takes place around the GTA. And I'm really lucky to live right behind a ravine that the salmon actually run through. It's near the Don River in Pomona Mills. So you all will get a glimpse of that. And I guess I'll let Lauren get the video started.
Great. Thanks, Kristyn. All right. So everyone, we have a little video for you. It's about 10, 15 minutes or so. So just relax, take a look, and we'll be back to answer any questions you may have. Sorry, guys, we're having some technical difficulties. I'm not sure why the volume or the sound of the video isn't working. So if you just give us a few minutes, I'll be back in just a moment. I'm just gonna see if we can make that work, okay? Okay, so I'm going to try this again. Please let us know if you can't hear it in the live stream. I'm going to try it again, and hopefully it works this time. Otherwise, we'll just have Kristyn talk through what she saw, and maybe we'll just have the video playing, and she can talk through the topics that she's talking about. Okay, guys, so since we can't seem to get the video to work, I'm just going to pause it, and I'm just going to let Kristyn kind of talk through what she is showing us. So I'll bring Kristyn on. Kristyn, do you want to unmute your mic?
The video and just let the video play and kind of talk about what I was seeing in these clips. Yeah, so I can talk about what's going on here right now. I'm just like introducing myself. Actually, Lauren, maybe do you want to pause the video if you're able to?
Sure.
Just for like a quick sec, and I'll just go back and do a small introduction. Yeah, so just before this, I was just standing in Pomona Mills Park, which I'm about to introduce, and I just want to give you a little bit of a background about myself. I just graduated from a Bachelor of Science from Western University in Environmental Science and Biology. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I joined the Youth Advisory Council. I'm really passionate about environmental issues, and I was really excited to be able to share some of that with all of you. So what I did is that I went to the ravine behind my house, and I was able to get some footage and talk about the meadow ecosystems and the river ecosystems just in the ravine. And yeah, I was also able to film some of the salmons that were migrating. They basically swim upstream, and they come from Lake Ontario, and they swim upstream to fresh water like the rivers in my ravine, but also there's other places around the GTA where it occurs. And they try to find an area where they can spawn, lay their eggs, and then get fertilized. And that's just kind of how the beginning of the salmon life cycle works. Maybe we can play the video, and as it's playing, I can just kind of talk through it like Laura mentioned. Sweet, yeah. So this was just like a quick little video about what Roots and Shoots really is and what its role is in the Jane Goodall Institute. So what I've learned about my time being a part of the Jane Goodall Institute of Canada and volunteering with them is that Jane's vision is to kind of combine, you know, the human, animal, and environmental aspect in all that we do, and just kind of promote this like healthy vision that she has. So that's what our work is centered on. Yeah, and we can just skip a little bit ahead. Hopefully we'll post this video and you can watch it with all the sound and stuff later. This is perfect, Lauren, yeah. So right here, I'm just kind of standing at the front of the entrance to Pomona Mills Park. It's located in Markham, Ontario, at the intersection of John and Henderson, if some of you are from Markham. And yeah, it's one of the many ravines that we have. This ravine was founded by the Pomona Mills Conservation actually, and their goal was to clean up this area through litter cleanups as well as planting projects to kind of restore this native land, as it's really important because it's a combination of like this meadow meets river ecosystem, and there's a lot of native plants and animals that live there. So yeah, maybe we can skip a little bit ahead to the meadow section. Sweet. Yeah, so you can like let it play on, and I know you can't hear the volume, but I guess you can just see the video. Yeah. So I just want to explain quickly what an ecosystem was before I got into the specific ones. And an ecosystem is really the interaction between the living things, so plants and animals, with the non-living elements in an environment. So that could be like the water and the sunlight and things like that. So where I'm standing right now, it's a very large open field, and it's filled with a lot of tall grasses and non-woody plants and native flowers. And these flowers are really important in these ecosystems because they provide plants for pollinators to come in, like bees and butterflies and beetles. And those are really important because pollinators actually pollinate 75% of all wildflowers and a third of the food that we eat. So they're very, very important. As well, for these ecosystems to thrive, meadow ecosystems, I just wanted to highlight that natural disturbances are actually really important. So that includes like wildflowers and natural animal grazing. And you might think, you know, that kind of sounds negative because, you know, wildfires like don't really have a good rep, but they're actually really important to make sure that this ecosystem doesn't become a forest ecosystem. So it kind of ensures that, you know, trees and big woody shrubs don't come in and take its place. And like I said, these ecosystems are super important because they help to harbor all these native wildflowers that pollinators need. And yeah, so I guess we can go to perfect. This is the first slide. I just wanted to talk about some of the vegetation and different plants that there were in Southern Ontario. So you can find these plants all over Southern Ontario. I'm just happy to be able to see them in my backyard. So the first one I want to talk to you all about was the Canada goldenrod, and maybe many of you have seen it before, but it's native throughout all of Ontario, which means that it's supposed to be here, it's natural here, and it's kind of the opposite of invasive. So invasive means that it kind of took over and it's not supposed to be growing here, and it's impeding other native plants like the goldenrod to come in. So this one is good because it's supposed to be grown here. It's perennial, which means that it regrows every spring, so you don't need to plant it again. Its habitat is a moist or dry meadow environment at the edge of forests and swamps, so that's where we have a lot of them in Pomona Mills Park. And then I kind of listed some fun facts. They're very tall, so they're very easy to spot. They're 2 meters tall. They bloom between July to November. They attract a lot of insects when in bloom, so they're very important for pollinators, like I mentioned before. And they're also used as a natural medicine, which I found to be really cool. So they can treat like sore throats and flu symptoms, tiredness, and digestion. And then if you skip a little bit more ahead just to the next slide, yeah, that should be good. Sweet, that's good. Yeah, so the next kind of family of plants I want to talk to you about was the Aster family. And so they're popular in autumn and they bloom from July to October. As you can see, all the plants look really similar because a family really means that they have similarities that are visual so that you can see, but also like biologically and genetically, they have a lot of commonalities. So all these plants actually have something called a composite flower head, which is super cool. And I learned this myself when I was doing this research. It means that each flower you see actually has hundreds of mini flowers in the center and on the petals, and they come together to make this one big structure that we know as a flower. So I thought that was cool. So the first one on the left is an alpine aster, and these are really common in meadow ecosystems. And you can see they're really pretty. They almost look like daisies. The one in the middle is a Aster celeste, so it's very similar. It just has this beautiful violet color. And then I want to comment on the one on the right, which I wasn't able to see, but they're in certain parts of Ontario, but they are threatened. And I just want to highlight what that word meant. And it just means that they're close to becoming endangered and then possibly extinct if we don't help improve their habitats and their populations. And they're threatened right now due to urban growth in these cities and towns that we've developed. So we just have to keep an eye on them. And then the next slide. Perfect. Yeah, so the next slide, it's called milkweed. It has a funny name, but it gets its name because if you cut open its stem, you can actually see this like milky sap that comes out of it. And many of you may have heard of them if you're really into like monarch butterflies, but they're very important to their populations because their caterpillars and larvae actually rely on milkweed to feed on their sap when they're young. So they're really important to saving their populations. I know that certain municipalities and like cities like Toronto in the GTA actually ask people to plant milkweed, you know, on their balconies if they can, if they live in an apartment, or in their backyard because they help the monarch butterflies migrate south when it gets cold. So they're really important to preserving their habitat. The next slide. Perfect. So the next slide is the Jerusalem artichoke, or they're called sunchokes, and they're grown for their thick, they're called tubers, and they're kind of like potatoes where in their roots they have these like big vegetables that grow and you can cut them and eat them. They're grown in meadows and near riverbanks, so perfect to where Pomona Mills is located because they have both of those ecosystems, and they're native to North America. But some farmers find them to be like weeds because they can grow and outgrow really quickly. So you got to keep an eye on them. But yeah, those are those. And then there's one last vegetation I want to talk about. Cool. It's called the Staghorn Sumac, and I used to see this growing up all over, Southern Ontario, and I never knew what it was because in the spring it's this like pretty green color, but in the fall it's when it's prettiest in my opinion, and it turns this like deep red, maroon red color. So they're native to Southern Ontario. Their name Staghorn comes from their thick hairy branches that resemble the horn of a male deer or a stag. So that's where that comes from. And they also grow berries for birds to eat and leaves for rabbits, moose, and deer. And apparently humans can eat their berries and they taste like lemons, but I've never tasted them myself. But it's a very complex plant and offers a lot to the habitat it lives in. So if you go a little bit further, you can even just play the video, Lauren. I know there's no sound, but you can see the rushing water and maybe it's exciting. Yeah, perfect. So I got a chance to just kind of go down to the river side or the river bank in Pomona Mills. And as you can see, there's a bridge that you can walk over. It's a really pretty ravine. If you guys get a chance to check it out, I totally advise you do so. So yeah, I just want to talk about how rivers provide a really important ecosystem and role in the water cycle. So the water cycle is this natural movement of water through natural landscapes and back into big bodies of water. And these rivers help to move water and important nutrients around the earth and also purify the water for us to drink because it's fresh water. These systems help to drain 75% of the surface water to prevent flooding, near our cities and things like that. And these rivers are the ones that I was able to capture the salmon migrating in Lake Ontario or from Lake Ontario. And then I think in the video, Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's okay. I just want to talk about there's like three main elements of the river that I was able to point out. Perfect. Yeah, that's good. So the part where you can see that it's breaking the surface of the water, that's called the riffle of the river. And that's like the fastest moving part, and it breaks the surface and it's really shallow. Then any of the space before or after that is called the run, and it's smooth flowing water. It's still quite quick. And then the pool is kind of like the area where I was standing in, where it's very still and it's really deep. And those are the three main areas of the river. And then, yeah, so now we can move to the next slide. It's a salmon life cycle. Perfect. Yeah, so just to tell you a little bit about the salmon life cycle, they all have very similar cycles, so I just want to highlight one of them, and I chose to highlight the Atlantic salmon. So salmon in general are called anadromous animals. Sounds like a complicated word, but all it means is that they're born upstream in fresh water, like rivers, like the one that I was able to talk to you all about, and they migrate downstream to oceans where they will live out the rest of their lives, and only when they are ready to spawn again and reproduce, and that's usually at ages like 5 to 7, they'll move back to fresh water. It's usually the place they were born, so it's really cool how they're able to like navigate back to where they were born, and they will spawn, and then they'll soon pass away after that, and that's just part of their natural life cycle. And just to note that the salmon that I was able to document in these videos, they don't actually return to the oceans like I had mentioned when they start to grow up, but they return to Lake Ontario. And that's because they were put there for recreational fishing a while ago. So that's where their permanent home is when they're not spawning. And then just the next slide, it's actually video. So you can just like play it. And this is that awesome footage I was able to capture. I saw about 7 different salmon, breaking the water and swimming upstream on the rocks. Yeah, so the salmon migration, I'll just start talking about it and hopefully that video comes on. Perfect. Yeah, so the salmon migration happens between mid-September to mid-November, they say, but really it ends around Thanksgiving weekend, so mid-October. And if you go to different locations around the Greater Toronto area, one big one is the Humber River. It's like near the Etienne Brûlé Park or something like that. There's a big list of places if you just like look up online, places to see salmon migration in the GTA. So yeah, like I said before, this is the Don River. And yeah, they start to migrate when temperatures start to cool down, so in the fall. And they travel through Lake Ontario to upstream spawning grounds, like I said, right over here. And there are 3 main salmon species that you'll see migrating in the GTA. There's the Atlantic salmon, the coho salmon, and the Chinook salmon. So coho and Chinook salmon are both Pacific breeds, so you can find them on the west coast, but they are brought over here closer to the east. And the Chinook salmon is the largest of the 2 Pacific salmons. And to ensure their populations reach a healthy level, the conservation areas as well as government are trying to really help with their conservation. And so they're working to promote like fish production and stocking to make sure they have big population levels, improve the quality and habitat that they live in, to educate people like, we're on right now about the importance of the salmon migration and helping them through this process, and just researching and monitoring their future migration. Yeah, so that's perfect. That last little clip was just me concluding. If anybody has any questions about the video, feel free to email me at Kristyn_YAC@janegoodall.ca. Maybe we can post my contact information along with the video and you all can watch it at a later time. But yeah, I hope you learned something from this webinar, and please feel free to ask me any questions.
Thank you, Kristyn. So sorry about the technical difficulties. We will have your video posted on our website or on the Facebook page as well, so people can check that out. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, please pop them in the chat. I'll start with a couple that I have. So what is your favorite habitat or ecosystem?
Super good question. That I don't know, if I had to think of like any ecosystem, I think my favorite was actually these like tidal pools that I got to see when I was out west in Victoria, BC. And they have all these like starfish and sea urchins in it. And it's really cool to just kind of like walk around and see all this wildlife. So I think that's why I really liked the river ecosystem. And I really enjoyed doing this webinar because it kind of reminds me of that kind of landscape. So like anything near water is like a good ecosystem for me.
That's awesome. And how can we support native plant communities in our own homes, in our own backyards?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the first thing that comes to mind is just trying to plant some of these native plants that I highlighted in my webinar. You can actually now buy a lot of these native plants at your local garden center because they're trying to promote people to plant these native plants in their gardens. So that's one way to do it, and also just ensuring that their habitats stay enriched and really healthy. There are certain groups that go out to try to remove these invasive species that I talked about that aren't supposed to be living in that habitat. So you can take part in action like that. And there's one other thing that I looked up that I remember was a cool thing. Oh yeah, so it's really important to look up to plant native plants, and that's because the conditions are perfect for them. So the soil conditions good, the pollinators are perfect, the weather is really great. So if you want successful plants in your garden, that's another incentive to plant native because they'll do really well.
Oh, that's some great advice. We're hoping to put in a pollinator garden in our front yard next spring and summer. So I'm excited to have all the native pollinators come and visit. So I'd love to know more about why did you want to join the Youth Advisory Climate Committee?
Really good question. Yeah. And I hope this answer, a lot of you watching probably have, can relate to this. But, when the pandemic happened and like we all had to go into lockdown, it was really hard to get involved in your community, or it felt that way, or just kind of pursue your passion. So for me, it's just environmental awareness and education to like my community. So when I saw an opportunity to be part of the Youth Advisory Council, it looked like really fulfilling and awesome work. And it really has been since I've been a part of it for these past few months. And I've met a lot of like-minded people who have a lot of ambition to do a lot of great things within Canada. So yeah, I just wanted to get involved as much as I could. And it's been a really great way to do that.
Great. And we have a question from Rachel. Where do invasive species come from and why are they harmful?
Really good question. Yeah. So invasive species, 9 out of 10 of the times, it's actually human intervention that gets in the way, and we here. So sometimes it can be during like import and export, like transportation, something they hitch a ride on like vehicles or boats if it's like a cross seas migration and they accidentally get put here. Another way is which they're actually intentionally brought here, and usually it's to, push out something that they're trying to get rid of. So let's just say there's a big population of one native plant. They want to kind of like subside that population. They'll bring in an invasive species to hope to lessen it, but usually it doesn't always go as planned. So they can start to take over. Yeah, and the reason why they're bad is because they start to push out these native plants. And like I talked about, they're very important in the ecosystems where they are native to, and they can start to take those resources from them, like water and sunlight and soil nutrients. And so it's just not good, and it produces a lot of bad competition, and it makes it really hard for native plants and animals to thrive.
Great, awesome explanation. And last question, I'd love if you could share some of the other work the Youth Advisory Council is going to be doing this year so people can look out for that and get excited about that work.
Yeah. So if you liked, what you learned in this webinar, we're actually doing a whole series of them, like Laura mentioned. So we're doing one a month. I think the next one is early November, and it's by another person who's part of the Youth Advisory Council. And we're going to be talking about different things that we see in our backyard. So that's the webinar series title. And on top of that, we're also doing an initiative called Living a Sustainable Year, and we hope to start that in January. We're going to compile different challenges that people can take part of all over Canada to kind of empower us to do things better for the environment. So one challenge may be energy focused or water focused or food waste focused. And we're also, lastly, if there's any young adults or kids in the audience, we're doing a political roundtable where we're giving kids a chance to write to, their local MPs or political leaders or just community leaders about questions they have about environmental issues or, things they want to bring up, and just give you the opportunity to sit down face to face with them and ask them questions and hear from them personally. So yeah, that's what we have in store for everybody.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kristyn. And we'll have that video posted on our Facebook and hopefully YouTube later today or tomorrow, so everyone can check that out as well. So thank you again for joining us today. Thank you everyone out there for joining and for learning a little bit today about our local wildlife here in the GTA and the really cool salmon run that we have. So please, if you're in the GTA, go check out Credit River, Don River. The salmon are spawning, they're going up. I think it's getting to the end, so try to check those out soon. And we'll be back again next week, and I'll be talking about environmental education and how to get into the environmental education field. So again, thank you, Kristyn, and we'll say bye now, and we'll be back next week. Thanks.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.